It was supposed to be an ordinary Saturday. Daniel stood near the park bench, adjusting the straps on his daughter Lily's jacket, while she skipped in small circles around him. The air smelled faintly of wet grass and roasted peanuts from a nearby cart. Their golden retriever Max lay calmly at Daniel's feet, tail brushing the pavement in slow, lazy strokes. Everything felt peaceful, predictable, safe. Then Max stood up. At first Daniel barely noticed. Dogs got restless. Squirrels passed. Leaves moved. But Max wasn't looking at the trees. He wasn't watching other dogs. His focus locked onto something near the trash bin a few feet away. A worn navy blue backpack. Max walked toward it slowly. He sniffed. Then he nudged it with his nose. "Max," Daniel called gently. "Leave it." But Max didn't. He nudged it again. Harder this time. Then he looked back at Daniel, not playfully, not curious, urgent. Daniel's chest tightened. "What is it, boy?" Max began pawing at the backpack. Not aggressive. Not afraid. Intent. His tail wasn't wagging anymore. His body was stiff, alert. He let out a low whine that Daniel had only heard once before, the day Lily wandered too close to the road. A strange chill crept up Daniel's spine. It was just a bag, right? He stepped closer, heart thudding. Max pressed his nose against the zipper, then looked up again, almost pleading. Daniel knelt down slowly, fingers trembling as he reached for the zipper. Moments later, everything changed. Before we continue, remember to like, share, and subscribe for more heart-touching dog stories. And tell me, where are you watching from? The morning felt easy. Cool air drifted through the park, carrying the faint smell of damp grass and roasted peanuts from a nearby cart. Sunlight filtered through tall maple trees, painting slow-moving shadows across the walking path. Daniel adjusted the collar of his jacket and glanced down at his daughter. "Lily, stay close," he said gently. "I am close," she replied, spinning once in her pink sneakers before stopping beside him. At their feet, Max lay stretched across the edge of the pavement. His golden fur caught the light, almost glowing. His tail brushed lazily back and forth against the concrete. Calm. Content. Daniel smiled to himself. These mornings mattered. After a long week of work and school, this was their ritual. Just the three of them. No rush. No noise. Just the steady rhythm of breathing and walking and being together. Max lifted his head briefly when a jogger passed. Ears flicked, then relaxed again. Daniel sat down on the wooden bench and leaned back, exhaling slowly. Lily crouched beside Max and wrapped her arms around his neck. "You're the best dog ever," she whispered into his fur. Max's tail thumped once. Daniel watched them with quiet gratitude. This is what safe feels like, he thought. A breeze shifted. Max's ears rose again. But this time they didn't fall. He stayed still. Too still. Daniel didn't notice at first. He was watching Lily try to braid a small section of Max's fur, concentrating as if she were working on something delicate and important. Then Max stood up. Not in a playful way. Not in a distracted way. He rose slowly, muscles tightening beneath his coat. His tail stopped moving. "Max," Lily said softly. Max stepped forward, deliberate, focused, and moved a few feet away toward the trash bin at the edge of the bench area. Daniel followed his movement with his eyes. There was nothing there except a navy blue backpack resting on the ground, slumped against the metal pole. Probably forgotten. Probably nothing. Max lowered his head and sniffed the bag. Then he nudged it. Once. Lightly. Daniel smiled faintly. "Leave it, buddy." Max didn't. He nudged it again, firmer this time. The sound of fabric scraping against pavement echoed softly. Daniel felt something shift inside his chest. Not fear. Not yet. Just awareness. "Max," he called, standing now. Max ignored him. That wasn't like him. Max was trained. Gentle. Responsive. Especially around Lily. But now his body looked different. Ears forward. Back straight. Tail low and still. He pressed his nose against the zipper area and inhaled deeply. Then he let out a small sound. A whine. Not loud. Not panicked. But tense. Lily stepped closer to Daniel and grabbed his hand. Why's he doing that? Daniel swallowed. It's probably just food, he said, though he wasn't convinced. He stepped toward the backpack. Max shifted immediately, placing himself between Daniel and the path as if blocking him from walking past it. Not aggressive. Protective. Intent. Daniel stopped. His heartbeat picked up, slow but heavy. The park noises continued around them. Children laughing, birds chirping, distant conversation. The world hadn't changed. But inside this small circle of space, something had. Max pawed gently at the backpack, then nudged it again. Harder. The bag tipped slightly. Daniel noticed the zipper wasn't fully closed. A small gap. He felt a strange chill move up his arms. Okay, he murmured. Okay, boy. He crouched slowly, every movement deliberate. Max stayed close, almost touching his shoulder. Daniel reached out. His fingers hovered over the fabric. He paused. It's just a bag, he told himself. Probably someone's gym clothes. Or books. Max let out another soft whine. Closer now. Urgent. Daniel looked into Max's eyes. There was no playfulness there. No curiosity. Only focus. Only concern. Lily, stay right behind me, Daniel said quietly. She nodded without speaking. Daniel wrapped his fingers around the zipper. The metal felt cold against his skin. He hesitated just for a second. The breeze stopped. The sounds of the park faded into the background of his mind. All he could hear was his own breathing, and the faint uneven rustle coming from inside the backpack. Daniel froze. He glanced at Max. Max didn't blink. He pressed his nose gently against Daniel's arm, as if to say, go on. Daniel pulled the zipper open slowly, carefully. The sound seemed louder than it should have been. He opened the flap just enough to peer inside, and his heart dropped. He pulled the bag fully open. Lily gasped behind him. Max stepped closer. Very still. Very alert. Daniel leaned in, eyes widening. Everything changed in that moment. And he knew without question. Max had sensed it long before he ever could. For a moment Daniel couldn't move. The world narrowed to the open backpack in front of him. Inside, wrapped in a thin faded blanket, was a tiny gray and white kitten. Its body was curled tightly, almost unnaturally still. One small paw twitched weakly against the fabric. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Oh my God! Lily stepped closer. Daddy! It's a baby cat, he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Max lowered his head slowly. His ears softened, tilting outward. He didn't bark. Didn't lunge. He simply inhaled, long and steady, as if confirming what he had already known. The kitten let out the faintest sound. Not a cry. More like a tired sigh. Daniel felt something shift in his chest. The backpack wasn't just forgotten. It had been left. He glanced around the park. Families sat on benches. A man scrolled on his phone. 2 teenagers laughed near the fountain. No one was looking for a bag. No one seemed worried. Was somebody trying to hide it? Lily asked. I don't know, Daniel answered honestly. He slid his hand gently beneath the blanket. The kitten felt light. Too light. Its fur was cool against his fingers. Max stepped closer. His nose hovering just inches away. His tail stayed low. Not stiff. Not tense. Protective. Daniel lifted the kitten slowly. It didn't resist. Its eyes fluttered open for a second, cloudy, unfocused, then closed again. Max let out a soft breath. A quiet exhale. As if he had been holding it this whole time. Daniel looked at the backpack again. There were no notes. No food. No water. Just the thin blanket and the kitten. He swallowed hard. Someone left her, Lily whispered. Daniel nodded. The word someone felt heavy. Who leaves something so small? Max nudged the empty backpack once more, almost checking it, then returned to Daniel's side immediately. He stayed close. Very close. Daniel stood slowly, cradling the kitten against his chest. Its tiny heartbeat fluttered faintly beneath his palm. "We need to take her somewhere," Lily said. "Yes," Daniel replied without hesitation. But even as he said it, doubt crept in. What if the owner came back? What if this was some kind of misunderstanding? He looked around again, scanning faces, searching for panic or urgency in someone's expression. Nothing. Just ordinary life continuing. Max turned in a slow circle, sniffing the air. His ears twitched. His gaze swept the park entrance, then the path, then back to Daniel. Alert. Waiting. "What do you think, buddy?" Daniel murmured. Max looked up at him. Steady. Unwavering. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Okay," he said. "We're not leaving her." Lily smiled softly, relief washing over her face. Daniel picked up the backpack and slung it over one shoulder. He wrapped the blanket more securely around the kitten, shielding it from the breeze. Max walked beside him, not ahead, not distracted. His body stayed slightly angled toward Daniel like a quiet guard. They moved toward the parking lot. Halfway there, the kitten stirred again. A tiny fragile meow escaped its mouth. Lily gasped. "She's alive." Daniel felt tears press unexpectedly at the corners of his eyes. "Yeah," he whispered. "She's fighting." Max's tail moved just once. Gentle. Daniel realized something then. Max hadn't been curious. He hadn't been playing. He had been concerned. He had known something living was inside that bag. Something vulnerable. Something that needed help. As they reached the car, Daniel paused for a second. He looked down at Max. "You saved her," he said quietly. Max blinked slowly, then leaned his head against Daniel's leg. No pride. No excitement. Just calm. As if this was simply what you do when someone needs you. Daniel opened the car door carefully. Lily climbed into the back seat, holding the kitten while Daniel started the engine. Max jumped into his usual spot without being told. But he didn't settle immediately. He kept turning his head toward Lily, checking, watching. Daniel adjusted the rearview mirror and caught his own reflection. His hands were shaking slightly. He hadn't expected this morning to turn into something else entirely. The park, the bench, the sunlight. It all felt distant now. As he pulled out of the parking lot, he felt the weight of what had almost happened. If Max hadn't nudged the bag, if they had walked away, if no one else had noticed. Daniel tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "Hold on," he said softly, though he wasn't sure if he meant the kitten or himself. Max let out one quiet sigh. The road ahead felt longer than usual. And somewhere deep inside, Daniel understood. This wasn't just about finding a kitten. It was about listening. About paying attention to the quiet signals. The first nudge. The one most people would ignore. But they hadn't. Because Max wouldn't let them. The drive felt longer than it should have. Daniel kept one hand steady on the wheel. The other rested gently over the small bundle Lily cradled in the back seat. "Is she breathing?" he asked quietly. Lily leaned closer, her cheek almost touching the blanket. "Yes, but it's very soft." Max shifted in the passenger seat. Not restless, just alert. His ears tilted back slightly every time the kitten made a faint sound. Daniel's mind replayed the moment at the park. The backpack. The hesitation. The way he had almost walked away. He tightened his jaw. He had almost ignored it. Almost told Max to leave it. Almost kept walking. That thought stayed with him. Heavy. The veterinary clinic was only 10 minutes away, but the red lights felt endless. Daniel's foot hovered over the brake pedal longer than usual. He checked the mirror every few seconds. The kitten stirred again. A weak tremble. Max stood up slightly in his seat, just enough to look over the console toward Lily. "It's okay," Lily whispered. "We're helping you." Daniel pulled into the small parking lot of the clinic. The sign above the building was simple, clean, familiar. He had brought Max here for checkups before. Never like this. He parked crookedly without realizing. "Stay close," he said as he stepped out. Max jumped down first, immediately positioning himself beside Lily. Not pulling. Not distracted. Walking slower than usual. Inside, the clinic smelled faintly of antiseptic and warm air. The hum of a small heater filled the quiet lobby. A woman behind the counter looked up. "Can I help?" Daniel didn't wait for her to finish. "We found a kitten. In a backpack. She's weak." The woman stood immediately. "Bring her back." Everything moved faster after that. A stainless steel table. Bright overhead lights. Soft, urgent voices. Daniel stood to the side, Lily clutching his hand tightly. Max lay down near Daniel's feet, but his head never lowered fully. His eyes stayed fixed on the table, watching, listening. A veterinarian entered, calm, composed. "She's dehydrated," she said gently after a quick assessment. "Very underweight." Daniel felt his chest tighten. "But she's breathing on her own," the vet continued. "That's good." Lily exhaled. Daniel hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. "Was she abandoned?" Lily asked. The vet hesitated. "It's possible," she said carefully. "But right now we focus on helping her." Daniel nodded slowly. The vet began small, careful movements, fluids, warmth, soft hands. Max shifted again. His nose lifted slightly as the kitten made a tiny sound. He didn't bark. Didn't whine. He just watched. Still. Daniel knelt beside him. "You knew," he murmured. Max blinked slowly. Daniel felt something settle inside him. Not just relief but recognition. There had been a moment back at the park. A decision. He could have pulled Max away. Could have dismissed the behavior as mischief. Could have chosen convenience. Instead, he had looked. He had listened. And that choice mattered. Minutes stretched quietly. The clinic sounds faded into a steady rhythm. Soft clinks of metal, low voices, the gentle hum of equipment. The kitten's breathing grew slightly stronger. More even. The vet smiled faintly. "She's responding." Lily's grip on Daniel's hand tightened again. But this time with hope. Max finally lowered his head to the floor. Not fully relaxed, but calmer. Daniel let out a long breath. He hadn't realized how tense his shoulders had been until now. "Can she stay here?" Lily asked. "For observation," the vet replied. "At least overnight." Daniel nodded. "Whatever she needs." The vet looked at him kindly. "You did the right thing bringing her in." Daniel glanced at Max. "He did," Daniel said quietly. The vet followed his gaze and smiled. "Good boy." Max's tail moved once against the tile. Gentle. Uncertain. As if he didn't quite understand the praise. Only that something fragile was safe now. Daniel stepped closer to the table. He brushed his fingers lightly over the kitten's tiny head. Her eyes fluttered open again. Just a sliver. But this time they stayed open a second longer. Stronger. Daniel swallowed. "You're okay," he whispered. Lily leaned forward carefully. "We'll come back tomorrow." Max stood slowly, stretching his legs before stepping closer to Daniel's side. His job for now was done. But Daniel sensed something else too. This moment, this decision to look, to act, had changed something inside him. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was quiet. Like the first nudge. The one that asks you to pay attention. To trust something deeper than logic. As they stepped back into the cool afternoon air, the sunlight felt different. Softer. Daniel placed a hand on Max's head. "Thank you," he said simply. Max leaned gently into his palm. And Daniel knew. Sometimes the most important decisions begin with something small. A pause. A hesitation. A dog refusing to walk away. That night felt unusually quiet. The house was the same. The furniture hadn't moved. The clock above the kitchen doorway ticked in its steady rhythm. But something was missing. A tiny, fragile presence that hadn't even belonged to them that morning. Lily sat at the dining table, pushing peas around her plate. "Do you think she's scared?" she asked softly. Daniel paused before answering. "She's warm," he said. "And people are taking care of her." Max lay beneath the table, his head resting across his paws. His ears lifted at the sound of Lily's voice. Attentive. Listening. Daniel noticed something else. Max hadn't eaten much at dinner. He'd taken a few bites, then walked to the front door and sat there, waiting, as if expecting someone small to follow them home. After Lily went to bed, Daniel stepped onto the back porch. The air had turned cooler. Crickets filled the silence with a gentle hum. Max followed and sat beside him. For a long moment neither moved. Daniel leaned his elbows against his knees. "I almost ignored you," he said quietly. Max turned his head slightly, just enough to look at him. Daniel replayed it again: the park bench, the sunlight, the backpack. He could still feel the hesitation in his fingertips before he had pulled the zipper. That small pause, that decision, it had led to something bigger than he realized. The next morning they returned to the clinic. The sky was pale gray, the kind of soft overcast that made everything feel slower. Daniel parked more carefully this time. Max stepped out first. His posture changed as soon as they reached the clinic door. Focused. Expectant. Inside, the air felt warmer than the day before. The same receptionist smiled when she saw them. "She made it through the night," she said gently. Lily's shoulders relaxed instantly. "Can we see her?" The vet led them into a quiet room in the back. A small heating pad sat inside a crate, and curled on top of it was the kitten. She looked different already. Still tiny. Still fragile. But her breathing was steadier. Her eyes opened as they stepped closer. Clearer now. Max approached slowly. No sudden movements. He lowered his head until his nose hovered just outside the crate door. The kitten blinked at him. Then, with surprising effort, she stretched one paw forward. Daniel felt something catch in his throat. "She recognizes him," Lily whispered. The vet smiled softly. "Animals understand comfort in ways we don't always see." Max didn't move. He didn't try to push the door. He simply stayed there, present. The kitten let out a small mew, stronger than before. Daniel felt warmth spread through his chest. The vet adjusted the blanket gently. "She was severely dehydrated," she explained, "and malnourished. It looks like she'd been left for at least a day before you found her." Daniel swallowed. "Left." The word carried weight. "Will she be okay?" Lily asked. "Yes," the vet said, "with continued care." Daniel glanced at Max again. He thought about the backpack. The way it had been placed neatly beside the trash bin. Not thrown. Not discarded carelessly. Placed. That detail lingered. Someone hadn't wanted to harm her. They just hadn't known what else to do. The discovery wasn't just that a kitten had been abandoned. It was something deeper. Someone had trusted, perhaps silently, that she might be found. That someone would notice. Daniel crouched beside the crate. "We noticed," he murmured. Max's tail brushed lightly against Daniel's leg. Slow. Gentle. The vet continued speaking quietly about feeding schedules and follow-up visits. Daniel listened carefully, nodding, absorbing every detail. When she finished, she paused. "If no one comes forward," she said, "she'll need a home." Lily looked up at Daniel immediately. Hope filled her eyes. Daniel felt the weight of that look. He wasn't prepared for this. Not this morning. Not yesterday. But life rarely waited for preparation. Max shifted slightly, moving closer to the crate. The kitten made another small sound. Daniel exhaled slowly. "We'll give it some time," he said, "to see if anyone asks about her." The vet nodded. "That's fair." They stayed for a few more minutes, just watching. The kitten yawned, a tiny, delicate motion that felt enormous in the quiet room. Max's ears softened, relaxed. For the first time since the park, his posture loosened fully. Daniel noticed it. The tension had drained from him, as if the mission was complete. Outside, the sky had brightened slightly. As they walked back to the car, Lily slipped her hand into Daniel's. "Daddy." "Yeah. I think she was waiting for us." Daniel smiled faintly. "I think," he said slowly, "Max was listening when no one else was." Max walked between them. Calm. Steady. not aware that he had changed the course of something small but important. The discovery wasn't dramatic. There were no flashing lights, no loud alarms, just a quiet realization. Sometimes what we find isn't an accident. Sometimes it's a moment that asks us to pay attention, to pause, to look inside the bag, to trust the nudge. And Daniel understood now. The backpack hadn't just carried a kitten. It had carried a choice. And they had opened it gently. 2 days later, the call came just after lunch. Daniel was in the kitchen, rinsing a coffee mug, when his phone buzzed against the counter. Max lifted his head from the living room rug before Daniel even looked at the screen. Unknown number. Daniel wiped his hands and answered. Hello. Hi, this is Dr. Harris from the clinic. Daniel's posture straightened instantly. Is she okay? There was a pause. She's stable, Dr. Harris said gently. But she's not eating enough on her own. We're supplementing fluids again. I'd like you to come in. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. We're on our way. He ended the call and turned. Max was already standing, ears forward, reading his face. We need to go, Daniel said quietly. Lily was still at school. There wasn't time to wait. Daniel grabbed his keys. Max followed without being told. The drive felt different from the first one. Not panicked, but urgent. The sky hung low and gray again, pressing the afternoon into something smaller. Daniel kept replaying the vet's words. Not eating enough. Supplementing fluids. He tapped the steering wheel lightly, an unconscious rhythm of tension. Max remained seated but upright, not lying down, watching the road ahead as if he understood direction mattered. When they pulled into the clinic parking lot, Daniel didn't bother adjusting perfectly this time. He stepped out quickly. Max stayed close to his left side, shoulder nearly brushing his leg. Inside, the air felt tighter. The receptionist nodded with recognition and led them back immediately. The room felt warmer than before. A small lamp glowed softly beside the crate. The kitten lay curled on the heating pad again. But her breathing was shallower. Daniel stepped closer. She was improving, Dr. Harris explained calmly. But young kittens can decline quickly. It becomes a matter of hours sometimes. Hours. Daniel felt that word land heavily. He crouched beside the crate. Max approached slower than usual. Careful. Measured. He stopped a foot away this time. As if sensing fragility, the kitten stirred faintly. Her eyes opened slower than before. Daniel placed a finger gently inside the crate, resting it near her paw. Hey, he whispered. She shifted slightly toward the touch. Dr. Harris adjusted a small feeding syringe. We need to keep encouraging her, she said. Warmth, contact, consistency. Daniel nodded. He felt the weight of time pressing around them. Not dramatic, not loud, but steady. Max lowered himself carefully to the floor beside the crate. Not resting fully, just positioned, present. His breathing slowed. Steady. Daniel noticed something subtle. The kitten's breathing began to match it. Tiny chest rising, falling, rising. He glanced at Dr. Harris. She responds to him, he said quietly. The vet observed for a moment. I believe she does. Daniel felt something settle into place. Can we stay for a while? He asked. Of course. Minutes passed slowly. Daniel spoke softly. Not full sentences. Just quiet reassurances. You're doing good. That's it. Stay with us. Max didn't move. His ears flicked occasionally at distant clinic sounds, but his focus remained on the crate. The kitten shifted again. This time she attempted to lift her head. It trembled, then dropped. Daniel's chest tightened. Dr. Harris stepped forward and administered a small amount of formula carefully. Come on, little one, she murmured. The kitten swallowed. Barely, but she swallowed. Daniel exhaled. Max's tail moved once against the tile. The clock on the wall ticked softly. Each second felt important. Daniel realized something then. Racing against time didn't always look like chaos. Sometimes it looked like patience, stillness, refusing to walk away. He leaned closer to Max. "Stay," he whispered. Max didn't need the command. He was already there. Another 10 minutes passed. Then 15. The kitten stirred again. Stronger this time. She lifted her head shakily and let out a small raspy meow. It wasn't loud, but it was clear. Daniel felt warmth flood his chest, so suddenly he had to blink back tears. Dr. Harris smiled faintly. "That's better." Max slowly leaned forward. He didn't touch. Didn't crowd. He simply allowed his presence to fill the small space between them. The kitten shifted closer to the edge of the crate, as far as she could without moving much. Toward him. Daniel placed his hand gently on Max's back. "You're helping her fight," he whispered. Outside the room, life continued. Phones rang. Doors opened and closed. But inside, time felt suspended. The race wasn't over. But momentum had shifted. Dr. Harris checked the kitten again. "She's responding to the warmth and stimulation," she said. "If she keeps this up, we'll be past the worst of it." Past the worst. Daniel let those words sink in. He had learned something in the last 48 hours. Sometimes rescue wasn't a single moment. It wasn't just opening the backpack. It was staying, returning, showing up again when things didn't immediately improve. Max finally rested his chin lightly on the floor. Relaxed but still close. Daniel sat beside him, waiting, breathing, matching the rhythm of something small that was fighting to stay. And in that quiet room, without noise or drama, they continued the race. Not with speed, but with presence and patience. By evening, the rain had started. Not heavy, just steady enough to blur the clinic windows and soften the streetlights outside. Daniel hadn't left. He had texted Lily from the waiting room earlier. "She's fighting. I'm staying a little longer." Lily's reply came quickly. "Tell Max I'm proud of him." Daniel read it twice before slipping his phone back into his pocket. Inside the treatment room, the air felt warmer now. The heating pad hummed softly beneath the crate. Dr. Harris stepped in again, her movements calm but purposeful. "She's responding to the formula better," she said. "Still fragile, but stronger than this morning." Stronger. Daniel let the word settle. Max stood the moment the vet entered, alert, attentive, then sat again once he recognized her scent and tone. He had learned the rhythm of this place. The kitten shifted, blinking slowly. Her movements were small but no longer delayed. She lifted her head when Daniel leaned closer. "That's it," he murmured. "You're still here." Dr. Harris prepared another tiny feeding. "This next hour is important," she explained. "If she maintains body temperature and keeps swallowing, we'll move her out of critical status." Critical. Daniel hadn't realized how tightly he had been holding his breath until then. Max moved closer to the crate again, carefully, and lowered himself onto the tile. He placed his body parallel to the opening, not touching, just near. The kitten's ears twitched. She made a small sound, not strained this time. Curious. Dr. Harris administered the formula slowly. The kitten swallowed, paused, swallowed again. Daniel watched each movement as if it were a quiet miracle. "You're doing good," he whispered. Max's tail brushed once against Daniel's shoe. Slow. Measured. The rain tapped gently against the glass. Inside, the clock ticked. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The kitten shifted again, but this time she tried to push herself upright. Her legs trembled. Daniel instinctively leaned forward. "It's okay," he breathed. She wobbled, then steadied for half a second before sinking back down. Dr. Harris smiled softly. "That's muscle response coming back." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Relief washed through him. Not explosive, not dramatic. Just steady warmth. Max adjusted his position slightly. He stretched one paw forward until it rested just beside the crate door. The kitten's nose moved. She inched closer. The distance between them narrowed to inches. Daniel felt something in that space, something quiet and instinctive. Not ownership. Not control. Just connection. Another 15 minutes passed. Dr. Harris checked her vitals again. "She's out of immediate danger," she said gently. The words felt almost unreal. Out of immediate danger. Daniel leaned back against the wall slowly. His shoulders dropped. The tension he had carried since the park, since the zipper, eased all at once. Max let out a long, slow sigh. The kind that comes after a storm has passed. The kitten curled slightly toward the side of the crate closest to him. Her breathing was steady now. Not shallow. Not rushed. Steady. Daniel ran a hand gently along Max's back. "You did it," he said quietly. Max didn't react to the praise. He simply stayed there. Present. Dr. Harris stepped closer. "We'll keep her overnight again," she said. "But she's turning the corner." Daniel nodded. He felt grateful, not only for the care, but for the quiet persistence that had brought them here. They hadn't given up when it became uncertain. They hadn't assumed it would fix itself. They had stayed. The rain outside softened to a mist. Daniel stepped outside briefly while the vet adjusted the crate bedding. The cool air met his face. He inhaled deeply. The world felt lighter. Not because the danger had been dramatic, but because it had been real. And they had answered it. When he stepped back inside, Max was still by the crate. Unmoving. The kitten had shifted even closer now. Her small body pressed lightly against the bars nearest him. Dr. Harris looked up and smiled. "I think she's chosen her guardian." Daniel felt a warmth rise in his chest. "Or maybe," he said softly, "he chose her." Max's ears flicked slightly at the sound of his voice. He didn't move. He didn't need to. The rescue wasn't loud. There were no sirens. No flashing lights. Just a fragile life that had been given another chance because someone had paused. Because a dog had refused to walk away. Daniel leaned down and rested his forehead briefly against Max's. "Let's bring her home when she's ready," he whispered. Max blinked slowly. The kitten closed her eyes. And in that quiet clinic room, warmed by patience, steadied by instinct, the rescue was complete. Not just of a kitten, but of something deeper. A reminder. To listen. To stay. To answer the first nudge. 3 days later, the rain was gone. Sunlight returned in soft, golden layers, warming the sidewalk outside the clinic and catching in Max's fur as Daniel opened the car door. "This is it," Lily whispered from the back seat. Max stepped out first. Not rushed. Not pulling. But aware. His posture carried a quiet anticipation. Inside, the clinic felt different this time. Lighter. The receptionist smiled widely. "She's ready," she said. Daniel felt something loosen inside his chest. Ready. Dr. Harris brought the crate into the room a few minutes later. The heating pad was gone now. In its place was a thicker blanket folded neatly. And in the center of it, she sat upright. Still small. Still delicate. But steady. Her eyes were clear. Bright. Lily gasped softly. She looked stronger. The kitten blinked at the sound. Then she saw Max. Her tiny ears perked forward. Max froze for a second, then stepped closer slowly, lowering himself until he was level with the crate. The kitten let out a small, confident meow. Not raspy. Not strained. Alive. Daniel felt emotion rise in his throat. "She gained weight," Dr. Harris said gently. "And she's maintaining her temperature on her own." Daniel nodded. "Thank you," he said sincerely. Dr. Harris smiled. "You listened when it mattered." Daniel glanced at Max. He hadn't done anything extraordinary. He had just refused to ignore something small. The paperwork was simple. The decision wasn't. But when the vet asked, "Are you ready to take her home?" Lily's eyes had already answered. Daniel signed. Max waited patiently by the door as Daniel carried the crate outside. The air smelled faintly of autumn leaves. The world felt normal again, and yet different. The drive home was quiet. Lily hummed softly in the back seat. Max kept turning his head slightly, checking the crate. When they arrived, Daniel set the crate down gently in the living room. He opened the door slowly. The kitten hesitated. then stepped out. Her movements were careful, testing the floor beneath her paws. Max remained lying down, still, calm, allowing her space. She took 3 tiny steps, paused, looked up at him. Max lowered his head slightly in response. An invitation. The kitten moved closer, until she was within inches of his nose. They stayed that way for several seconds. No sudden motion, no tension, just breathing. Daniel watched quietly from the couch. Lily sat cross-legged on the rug. "What should we name her?" she whispered. Daniel smiled faintly. "Maybe something that reminds us of how we found her." Lily thought for a moment. "Hope," she said. The name settled gently into the room. Hope. Max blinked slowly. The kitten, Hope, turned in a small circle before settling beside his front paw. Not touching fully, just close. Daniel felt the meaning of the past week sink in. The park, the backpack, the clinic, the waiting. It hadn't been dramatic. There were no grand gestures, just steady presence. Later that evening, Daniel stood in the kitchen watching through the doorway. Hope had climbed onto a folded blanket beside the couch. Max lay on the floor nearby, his breathing deep and even. Hope stretched one tiny paw outward until it rested lightly against his fur. Max didn't move, but his tail brushed once against the rug. Daniel leaned against the counter. "You knew," he said quietly. Max's ear twitched. Daniel replayed the moment again, the first nudge. How easy it would have been to dismiss it. How small the choice had seemed at the time. He walked into the living room and knelt beside Max. "Thank you," he whispered. Max leaned gently into him, not seeking praise, not expecting anything, just there, present. Lily yawned from the couch. "She feels safe," she murmured sleepily. Daniel nodded. "She is." As night settled around the house, a new rhythm formed. Hope's small movements, Max's steady breathing, the soft hum of the refrigerator. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It unfolded slowly, in shared space, in quiet companionship. Daniel realized something else too. Max had always been protective of Lily, always alert at the edge of playgrounds, always attentive near streets. But this had been different. There had been no command, no training cue, just instinct, compassion. He had sensed vulnerability where others saw an abandoned object. He had insisted gently, persistently, until someone listened. Daniel turned off the living room light and stood for a moment in the dim glow of the hallway. Max lifted his head slightly. Hope remained curled against him. "You did good," Daniel said softly. Max lowered his head again. Outside, the wind rustled the trees lightly. Inside, warmth filled the room. The house felt fuller now. Not louder, not chaotic, just fuller. And as Daniel walked toward his bedroom, he carried a quiet understanding with him. Sometimes healing begins not with dramatic rescue, but with the decision to stay, to return, to keep showing up. And sometimes the one who teaches you that has 4 paws and a heart that listens more closely than your own. A week later, they returned to the park. The same bench, the same stretch of pavement, the same maple trees swaying gently overhead. But nothing felt quite the same. Daniel sat down slowly, resting his elbows on his knees. Lily stood beside him, holding a small pink leash attached to Hope's tiny harness. The kitten's steps were cautious but curious, her nose twitching at every new scent. Max walked slightly ahead of them, not pulling, not distracted, just scanning. The air carried that early autumn crispness again. Distant laughter floated from the playground. A dog barked somewhere near the pond. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary morning. Daniel watched Max carefully. His ears lifted briefly at passing footsteps. His tail moved in calm, steady sweeps. But every few seconds his eyes returned to Hope, checking. Hope attempted a small leap onto the bench. She didn't quite make it. Lily laughed softly and lifted her the rest of the way. "You're getting stronger," Lily said proudly. Hope blinked in the sunlight and curled into Lily's lap. Daniel exhaled slowly. The spot near the trash bin was empty now, clean, as if nothing had ever happened there. But Daniel couldn't look at it the same way. He remembered the hesitation, the way he had almost kept walking. He reached down and scratched behind Max's ear. "You changed something that day," he murmured. Max leaned gently into the touch. The wind moved through his fur. Daniel noticed something else. Max wasn't tense here. He wasn't fixated. The alert edge from that first morning was gone. He had done what he needed to do. Hope shifted in Lily's arms and let out a small bright meow. Max's ears twitched. He stood slowly and walked closer to the bench. Hope reached one paw toward him. This time she didn't hesitate. She rested her paw right on his nose. Max blinked. Still. Patient. Daniel smiled. Some bonds form in noise. Others form in silence. He watched the two of them, the large golden retriever and the tiny gray and white kitten, sharing the same patch of sunlight. It felt symbolic. A reminder. Lily looked up at him. "Do you think she remembers?" Daniel considered the question. "Maybe not the backpack," he said gently. "But I think she remembers feeling safe." Max settled down at their feet. Hope climbed carefully from Lily's lap and made her way down to the pavement. Daniel's heart jumped for a split second. But Max stayed beside her, matching her pace. Hope sniffed the grass, then brushed lightly against Max's leg. Daniel watched the movement closely. Protective instinct flickered inside him, the same instinct Max had shown. He realized something then. It had spread. That awareness. That pause before walking away. It had become part of him too. A jogger passed. A child ran by with a balloon. Life continued. But Daniel felt different in it. More attentive. More present. He stood and walked toward the trash bin slowly. Max glanced up but didn't follow. Daniel stopped in front of the exact spot where the backpack had rested. He looked down. Just pavement now. Nothing more. He felt gratitude rise quietly in his chest. Not just for the rescue, but for the lesson. He turned back toward his family. Hope had climbed partially onto Max's back, clumsy and confident. Max remained still, allowing it. Lily laughed. "Look at them." Daniel walked back and crouched beside them. He ran a hand along Max's neck. "You listened," he said softly. Max's tail brushed against the ground in slow rhythm. Daniel looked at Lily. "At first I almost didn't." Lily tilted her head. "But you did." He nodded. Because Max wouldn't stop nudging. Because something inside him chose to trust it. Daniel sat back down on the bench. The sunlight filtered through the trees, warming his face. Hope curled up beside Max again, this time pressing fully into his side. No hesitation. No fear. Max rested his chin gently over her small body. Protective. But relaxed. Daniel felt peace settle around them. The kind that doesn't arrive loudly. The kind that grows from quiet decisions. He thought about how easily moments pass. How often people walk by things they don't understand. A bag on the ground. A small sound. A nudge. He reached down and intertwined his fingers with Lily's. "We always pay attention," he said quietly. She nodded. Max looked up briefly at the sound of Daniel's voice. Their eyes met. And in that glance there was something unspoken. Not heroism. Not pride. Just partnership. Trust. Daniel leaned back against the bench and let the morning unfold around them. Hope's breathing slowed as she drifted into sleep against Max's warmth. Max closed his eyes too. Guarded. But calm. And Daniel understood something clearly now. Sometimes the strongest bonds aren't built in dramatic moments. They are built in the pause before a decision. In the willingness to look closer. To open something gently. To answer the first nudge. The breeze moved through the trees again. The world remained ordinary. But their family had grown stronger. And as Daniel watched Max rest his head protectively over something once so fragile, he knew. Some instincts are more than training. Some nudges are more than curiosity. And some bonds are unbreakable.